Hi, I'm Kay of Kay's Creative Home. Today we're going to be making a flower wreath. This is my first one of this type, and I started by cutting out a piece of round canvas and I attached it to my wreath form using zip ties, and you can see where I attached it at each crossbar. And then I marked it by taking a ruler and going from crossbar to crossbar, marking my center and marking out 1 inch from the center, 1 inch increments from the center. All right, let's move on and let me show you what I did. So I knew I wanted to make a flower, wasn't exactly sure how it was going to turn out, but I started by making these petals. I went from one corner to the other diagonally, and then I folded in each side to reach that diagonal point I had made. I stretched the petal a little bit at the top, and then about where the petal, I guess it's about 4 inches down from the top of the petal, I gathered it and then I put this zip tie around it. And that's going to just hold it for me until I'm ready to add it to my wreath form. I'm still using my new zip tie gun and it's still working wonderfully. Again, I lay out my 10-inch piece of mesh. The finished edges are to the sides. I brought that one corner over diagonally, and then the 2 points of my triangle are now folded down to that same center point. And then I stretch the top of my petal a little bit, and from the end of that point I begin to gather the petal in the center. It's about 4 inches into the center, and I'll gather that up, and then I'll add a zip tie around it to hold it in place. As you see me working, I have others in clamps, but I've run out of clamps, so I'm using some zip ties also to hold them. Alright, let me get this one tightened up, and then we'll be adding them to the wreath form. And all of the petals for this wreath are made with the same design. Now, because I'm working with yellow and white mesh, I marked the back of my wreath form so that you wouldn't see it through the yellow or the white mesh. So I'm trying to decide where I'm going to start adding these petals, and I think I've decided on the second to the outer ring. So I started a crossbar so that I'll have that support of the crossbar, keeping the petals from moving. And then I'm just going to try 2 petals in between each crossbar just to kind of see if it fills in nicely. So I'm inserting my first flower or petal into the zip tie. And I'm measuring out about 4 inches from the edge of the wreath form. And I'm going to kind of do this as I go to make sure all my petals are the same length, the same distance from the wreath form, so they'll make a nice even round flower. Alright, I'm going to show you again. I'm inserting my petal where I have the zip tie, and my little clamp gets in the way a little bit, but I'll move that in a moment. Getting it lined up from that 4-inch mark. From the outer ring up to the tip of my petal is 4 inches, and then I tighten it in place, and then I'll later come back and really tighten those zip ties and clip them. But right now I'm trying to see if 2 in the center of each crossbar is going to be enough. And what I would like for them to do is the petals to touch side by side without overlapping. Again, you see how I'm lining it up with that 4-inch mark. This is one of the advantages of using a cutting mat when you're working. Those measurements come in handy continuously. So again, if you can kind of see, I have my bar right at one line, and then 4 inches higher is where my petal is ending. And every time I'm really ready to add a petal, I'll turn it a little bit so make sure it's nice and even, and I can kind of see where I want the next petal to go. You saw me just adding the white petals in there, just making sure I have enough space to add them in between later on. Alright, I got this marked out. I'm liking how things are looking. 2 in the center between each crossbar is enough. So I'm going to do this continuously around my wreath form until I get all the way to the end. So I've made it around my outer ring of my wreath form, and I'm going back with my zip tie gun and tightening up and cutting these zip ties. And because of the angle of the zip ties, the petals turn that direction a little bit. But you can see I just go back and straighten them up a little bit, and they seem to do well with staying in place. So now I've got all this extra tail. You can see I've already cut it off of the other ones. So I'm going back, and I leave about an inch on the bottom. But I go back and cut all of that extra tail off. And be careful when you do this, because you could cut into your petals. You want to make sure you stay clear of them. And my scissors are a little dull, so I'm really pressing down, and I do not want to cut into anything I'm not supposed to. So again, just be careful and pay attention as you're cutting. And now we're ready to move on to the next step. And what I'm doing here is adding my next row of zip ties. And now I am on the second ring from the inner circle. And I'm just going in between each of my yellow petals. And that's where I'm going to add a next petal to the next ring. And as they come in, you see I'm adding my first one. It's going to fill in some of that gap between the petal. It's going to cover some of the tail from the first round because the petals will kind of overlap a little bit. And it's just going to fill in and make my next little row or circle of petals. And I am going to do this round with alternating colors. I'm going to go yellow then white. Now this time, because even though it's on top of the other petals, I can still see those black lines on my cutting board. So I'm going to lay each petal down, and you see I keep pulling it down on the end to make sure it's on the next 2-inch mark. And you can see here I have done not only my second round, but I have 3 rings or rounds of petals on the board now. I have my first row. The second row, as I said, came in about I think I did about 2 inches, it looks like on here. And I did that with yellow and white. And then my third round came in another 2 inches approximately, and it's all in yellow. Now, if I had known where I was going to place all of my petals, I would have added all of my zip ties from the beginning. But since I didn't know, I'm kind of playing it as I go along, and you won't really be able to clearly see where I'm adding each zip tie. Since I did my third row on that very inner ring of the frame, I'm now doing my next row on the white canvas. And you can see where I have those little black marks. I'm trying to go right around where I have that 1-inch mark again, because I'm trying to each time come in that 1 to 2 inches. My goal was to do close to 1, but sometimes I'm coming in between that 1 and 2-inch mark. So now my goal is to come on the on each bar where I have those lines coming down, and then to put one in the center. So like in each of those triangles, see right where my hair is right now, it's in between one of those triangles. So I'll be on the line, and then I'll be kind of in between. Hope that makes sense. And then I'm going to add my petals. So I'll have a petal on the line, one in between, and then a petal on the line again. Now, since this reframe has 6 crossbars, which I'm calling my lines because that's where I drew my lines from, I will end up with 12 petals on this circle. And I am doing them in all white. And so let me get this circle made. Following the same steps, putting my zip tie at approximately that 1-inch mark, tightening my petal in, making sure the tip of my petal is about 1 inch in from the petal that's behind it. What I like about this, by doing these petals so close and doing them like that 1 inch apart, they raise up a little bit, because the petal and the tail that I cut off, all of that cushion is behind the previous petal. It's behind the petal I'm adding in. And so it raises it up a little bit. It makes it look a little more like a flower instead of them just laying out flat. So now I'm going through the same steps again, using my gun to cut off my zip ties, my zip tie gun, and cutting off those tails so I don't end up with all this bulk in the center. Now, I didn't want the center of my flower to be too huge, so I decided to add yet one more layer. And again, this flower is a lot fuller than most people make their flowers. I wanted to try it. I wanted to see what happened. I wanted that bulk, as I said, to raise the petals up. I'm not using a raised frame, so I need my petals to raise on their own. So I made them tighter. I made them closer together, which means I had to use a lot more. So now I'm going to do the next one more inner circle, and this time it's going to be in yellow, and I'm just going in between each of the white petals I just added. And again, it is coming in where I'm adding the zip tie is toward the center 1 more inch, and making sure the petal stops about 1 inch from the top of the white petals. So my yellow petal that I'm putting in now will be about 1 inch lower than the white petal in the previous ring. All right, let me get those added in, and I'll get these zip ties cut off and trim my tails up, and then we'll see what's next. So to make my flower center, I'm using this yellow mesh tubing, and I'm going to use some white mesh tubing, put them together and make my center. Now I'm going to do that by first getting it all straightened out here. And then what I'm going to do is wrap it around my 4 fingers from my pinky to my pointer finger. I start by taking the tubing and putting it between my 3rd and 4th finger. And that's just to hold it so I have something to grip it. Then I wrap it around, like I said, my 4 fingers about 4 or 5 times. And then I just hold it in place again. And then I'm going to take a zip tie. And down at the base of between that 3rd and 4th finger again, right there at the base, I'm going to insert the zip tie. And hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. Insert the zip tie, bring it through the other side of my hand. And then I'm kind of holding things in place. I'm sorry the rest of this tubing is in the way. And then I'm going to just tighten my zip tie. And I do it slowly because I want the zip tie to stay in the center, but I've got to ease this off of my fingers now. So I ease it up a little bit, I tighten it a little bit, I ease it up some more, I tighten it again. I'm not too concerned about it being perfectly in the center because I'm going to actually zip tie each of these bundles to my wreath. And if it's not exactly in the center, that's okay, because when I put my zip tie on to add it to the wreath, I can make sure that's in the center. So I want to do a whole bunch of these, and I'm not going to cut each one and start all over because it's hard to hold these things in your hands. So I'm just going to keep going on that same string. I left about maybe 3 to 4 inches, and then I started wrapping them around my hands again. And it's the same process. I'm going to do it over and over again, and I actually do it until I run out of these Deco mesh tubings. And I just wanted to make as many as possible because I knew I could use it another time if I didn't use it for this wreath. So you can see here I've done a whole bunch. Like I said, I went right to the end of my tubing, and I'm going to see what I can get done with this. In the end, I actually did need some more because I wanted that center good and full, and I didn't want you to be able to see through it to the canvas. And so this is what I put together here. You see this whole line of tubing ready to be added to my wreath. All right, let me show you how I get it added. Now, when we started the video, I showed you how I marked my canvas with a point in the center and then that little star, and each point of that star came out about 1 inch. So what I'm doing is adding a zip tie to the very center, and that's where I'm putting my first little bundle of this tubing. And then at the tip of each of that point of that little star, so 1 inch out from the center on those 6 points, I'm adding another little bundle. So I'm going to go around from the center, and the next circle around the center will have 6 of these bundles. And then I ended up going out again and doing 9 bundles from that second circle, first circle. Okay, the center, a circle that's 1 inch out that has 6, and then another circle that's 1 inch out that has 9. Got it. I would show you the back of the wreath, which is what I usually do, so you can see exactly where each point is, but the white canvas and the white zip ties, you can't really see them. Sorry about that. I'll have to keep that in mind next time and try to use some colors that are visible so you can really see what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to get all of these added in and show you what it looks like. Now before I show you though, don't forget that if you enjoyed the video, to give it a thumbs up and share it with others. And if you like to see more of these videos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you'll be notified as new videos are released. So I want to thank you for spending this time with me, and I'll be talking with you again real soon.